What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the 2013 mixtape by Meek Mill. Basically, this project is called Dreamchasers 3 and it came out in the fall of 2013. Now, the thing about this particular project is this is a heralded mixtape. This is an anticipated project here and a pretty heralded one just because the mixtape that came before this one was Dreamchasers 2, which was the most downloaded mixtape on DatPiff back in the day, and that was like seen as like the premier mixtape website for those sorts of times as far as that pitch kind of happened. It was basically the most downloaded mixtape for over 10 years as far as that pitch kind of happen. So this one had a lot of hype towards it and stuff like that. Dream Chasers 1 was a big deal. Also, that one had over 1 million downloads, and I think Dream Chasers 2 had over 2 million. So it's a pretty dope concept to get that one in particular. Now, this one is probably the worst of the three. I'll just go ahead and say that this is not a horrid mixtape, but it's just not quite as salingly good as like the first two Dream Chasers. I'd probably say Dream Chasers 1 is the best one in my opinion. Dream Chasers 2 is definitely pretty good. It's a valiant one enough. That one is a valiant enough one, I'd have to suppose. But this one's kind of like the third ringer. This is definitely like, this one's not necessarily dead weight, but just kind of has some fluff and filler on here, I'd have to suppose. Just an interesting concept. This is some interesting stuff just because Meek Mill was kind of bubbling over in 2013. He definitely had a huge 2012 between Dreams and Nightmares, just with songs like the title track and Amen and some of those type songs and Burn. And then he also had the most downloaded mixtape from 2012 and just overall in general Dream Chasers 2 as far as that pitch kind of happened with it. So it's just a big deal. Meek Mill, like I was saying, Meek Mill kind of bubbled over in 2013. He was kind of getting in trouble with his court cases and stuff like that. It was just kind of an interesting pitch. He did go to prison in 2014. He was starting to be on the verge of dating Nicki Minaj around this particular time, and he just had some brewing type cuts on here. He had a huge song on like the Self Made Volume 3 album with like the song Levels and stuff like that. He probably had some good features around this particular time, but this is kind of like an awkward time for Meek Mill, I would have to say, just because the Dreams and Nightmares album came out in late 2012 and had kind of bubbled over by the time that this particular project came out. So it was just an interesting kind of stopgap for Meek Mill, despite the fact that he didn't put out his second album until like the summer of 2015. So he was in prison in 2014, didn't drop a mixtape in 2014. So these were just kind of some different times. It was just different because back in these particular times, like the early 2010s, some of that type pitch, folks weren't dropping albums like every single year. So it's just some interesting stuff. I feel like Meek Mill was not quite as much of like a ringleader and an overall domination type aspect with this particular project. He definitely had some good hits on here, but it's just kind of the concept that some of these type ones, there were definitely some ones that were kind of revolutionary, I'd have to suppose, but it just wasn't as revolutionary as the first Dream Chasers or as Dream Chasers 2, I'd have to suppose. Both of those had some interesting kind of trap cuts on there, and they just kind of helped lay some groundwork and revolutionize the mixtape scene as far as that pitch kind of happens. There is some stuff on here, like it was interesting that Meek Mill had a song with Tory Lanez as far back as 2013. There's some ones on here that reminded me of like Lil Durk and some folks like that. There's a song on here like Ain't Me and some of those type ones. I feel like Fucking With Me and Ain't Me are two revolutionary type ones that just were sounds that wouldn't be developed until like 2016, 2017 as far as that pitch kind of happened. At least it was pretty early stages to get some of those. Definitely some ones on here, some decent kind of traps, some songs like Levels, like Make Me and Dope Dealer and some of those type ones I'd have to suppose. Just an interesting concept, some of the stuff that Meek Mill was kind of on. But this particular mixtape era was just kind of an odd era for him just because he didn't have a ton of stuff out and he was just kind of doing more of just like single. Meek Mill was just kind of doing more of like single type format, so he didn't really have the bravado that he had in 2012. It was just interesting some of the songs that kind of happened. Songs like I Beyond That and Make Me and Levels and some of those type songs that were some of his biggest songs out of 2013. It's just an interesting batch of songs as far as that pitch kind of happens because drill was not quite as heavy on here. Meek Mill didn't have a song like I'm a Boss or those type songs, or House Party, some of those type pitches, or Burn or Amen or some of those type ones. There were some music videos on here. This one had the most promotion, had at least 3 music videos, which I'm just going to count as singles, but I just would have to suppose and stuff. It's just kind of interesting just because these were some bubbling type ones. This is a good mixtape. It's just not a classic mixtape. This is kind of the concept about it. Has about half the mixtape is seen with some pretty sheer quality, I'd have to suppose, but this is not enough to really deliver full blown. It's not going to get like a 8, 9, 10 out of 10, but it does definitely have some good stuff on here, and it is worth the download. Considering that it's free, it's a definite good bargain to kind of fuck with this particular project. So yeah, there were 3 music videos for this particular mixtape, and I'm going to go ahead and recommend. There's 16 songs on here minus like the Rich Porter skit. There's 17 songs minus the Rich Porter skit. There's 16. Out of those 16, I wound up recommending 9. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 9 songs I recommend. We'll talk about these. So basically, the 9 songs I recommend would be I Beyond That. The 9 songs I recommend would be I Beyond That, Dope Dealer, Make Me, Fucking With Me, Rich Porter, Ain't Me, Right Now, I'm Leaning, in Heaven or Hell. So, so there were kind of three singles released from this particular mixtape. One of which was "I Beyond That," another of which was "Heaven or Hell," and another of which was "I'm Leaning." So the second single was "I'm Leaning," the third single was "Heaven or Hell." So I'm going to talk about these singles first, and we'll get to the rest of the mixtape. So the first single, "I Beyond That," is basically like a vanilla brewing trap cut. I'd have to say this is a thumper and a regular night out and kind of antics type song. I would definitely feel like, and this is just kind of a basic bop. So I definitely like the affability of this particular song. It's just a basic kind of gem on here, just a standard kind of mixtape cut. And this is kind of the concept as to what was happening with mixtapes by late 2013, early 2014. They just weren't quite as much of a heralded big deal as they were back in. Like, I want to say that this mixtape possibly got to at least 1 million downloads. I'm not really full blown for sure, just because Dat Piff is not around anymore. But I want to say this mixtape was at least somewhat of a big deal. There were enough people that just downloaded it just because it was Meek Mill and because of the first two and that sort of pitch. But I kind of feel like some of these type ones, I mean, this was definitely like a brewing type trap cut on here, but it just felt rather vanilla compared to Meek Mill's more heyday back in like the early 2010s as far as that pitch can happen. Now, 2013 was still relatively early 2010s, so it's just kind of the concept. This is a good song, but like I was saying, it's just basic and vanilla, just a regular kind of night out, just kind of a thumper, just has some of that bounce on there. French Montana, Nicki Minaj, Fabulous are on this particular song. It's a good concept to kind of get that on here. I do like some of these French Montana hooks on here as far as that pitch kind of goes with this. It's kind of the concept. This is just like a basic bop. I just would have to say, if you're just looking for some loud pack from like the early mid 2010s as far as that pitch kind of happens, and you're just looking for like some free numbers to kind of get, this is a good concept to kind of start with and have for some of those type gems. But it's just kind of more, the energy is not quite as super revved compared to Meek Mill in some of his earlier days, that I suppose. But it is a nice, it's not a bad song at all. "I'm Leaning" is the second single, and this has Travis Scott, Birdman, and Puff Daddy on there, which is a pretty nice concept. This is basically like a bubbling kind of vehicle music of a song. I'd have to say it's like an evening about to pop off type tune. I would definitely feel like, and this song is just an exhilarating dark trap cut, I would have to say. So it's a pretty good concept to get this one in particular. I would have to say this is definitely kind of a brewing type one. Definitely like the concept of this particular pitch one. This reminds me of something that Travis Scott would kind of do in like his earlier mixtape days, as far as that fair kind of has with this. This is kind of a trailblazing type song that kind of paved the way just within that particular pitch, as trap was starting to metamorphosize and stuff like that just between 2013, 2015, some of those type years, as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. This is very Travis Scott-esque and stuff like that. Just a real kind of brewing type one, just great vehicle bound type stuff, just kind of enjoying like sometimes in your vehicle, stunt type music, floss type music, stuff like that. Just pull up to a nightclub looking flashy, some of those type pizzazz type tunes. I would definitely have to suppose pretty nice one overall. Definitely pretty highlighted one. This one, once again, this has kind of more mellow energy. I'd have to suppose these are just more like brewing and bubbling type numbers, just for kind of marinating a bit and just kind of having some kickback. Just these are just kind of some more bubbling and brewing type ones, just for some marinating type kickback, just for like a slow pull up type music and some slow stunt type music and just easy kind of pizzazz about it. But I would have to say that these are some pretty highlighted ones, just kind of overall type have, I would have to say. So basically, "I Beyond That" and "I'm Leaning" are some basic type ones, but they just do a pretty good job of just like the energy being carried. It's just like these feel so emphatic. These do kind of feel like album throwaways. I mean, they're not album throwaways in terms of quality, but it's the aspect of just getting some of these to where the turn up is good, but it's probably about like a 7, 7.5, 8 out of 10 in terms of energy, compared to some of Meek Mill's bigger songs like "Burn" and "Believe It" with Rick Ross, some of those type ones. "I'm a Boss," some of those type ones that he has. I'd have to say there's some other ones off of like Young and Famous, off of like Dreams and Nightmares, off of Dreams and Nightmares, Young, Rich and Famous, and Dreams and Nightmares off the Dreams and Nightmares album. I'd have to say are some other high octane type ones that kind of have that pitch, but I would have to say that "I'm Leaning" is a pretty highlighted one. Definitely some good vehicle brewing type music. And then "Heaven and Hell" is a pretty highlighted one. Definitely like this one. This one samples like the song that's by, I forget the name of it, but it's like by, it was a song out of the 90s. It's like called like "I Got Five on It," something like that. I forget who did that particular song, but I do like that song quite a bit. It has a great beat on there. This is like a really druggy kind of nightclub hazer, I'd have to say. This has a twinkling beat, and this is just a good malaise kind of ruminating type tune, and it's just an overall hot type beat. This one's just an overall hot type beat, I would have to suppose. Just really enjoyed this particular one. Yo Gotti did a song like this around this particular time also. The song was called "I Know" or something like that, but this is just a real highlighted type one. Just a definite druggy type one. Jadakiss suits this song pretty well. It's good to have a lyricist like him on this particular song as far as that pitch kind of happens. Really like the hook artist on this particular song. He did a great job with it. Had a real emphatic kind of hook on here. He just really authorized the song and really put it together that pretty damn well. And then Meek Mill did a pretty good job with it. So it's just a good concept of that. Just a real druggy type night type blear of a song. I'd have to say a real nice hazer of one to kind of get. It's really, I mean, it's a lengthier song. I almost didn't recommend this song just because it's over 5.5, 6 minutes as far as that pitch kind of happens. I like it enough to be able to recommend, but it's just kind of one that's just a lengthier. I mean, you get 2 lengthy verses on here. I feel like this song probably should have been like 4.5 type minutes, but the hook artist also does some good vocal work on here, so it's just kind of the concept. It's just a lengthier, kind of more nightclub type song. It's just interesting because most nightclub songs are not over 5.5 or 6 minutes. This is kind of the pitch about it, but it is a nice one. So that's the 3 singles off this project. So talk about some other songs on here, like Dope Dealer is a pretty highlighted one. Dope Dealer is a pretty highlighted one. This is definitely like a syrupy, kind of hypnotic, kind of ratchet gem, I'd have to say. It's pretty similar to Levels by Meek Mill, I would have to say. Pretty good concept to get that one in particular. This is like a basic Instagram kind of dance cut, I would have to say, and it's just an overall kind of bop. Definitely appreciate this particular one. It's just interesting what Meek Mill was kind of doing with trap music around 2013 with songs like Dope Dealer and Levels and some of those type pitches, just because it was different from like the sound that was like ratchet by some of those folks like 2 Chainz and DJ Mustard and some of those type folks, and it was also different. It was also different from 2010's trap that like Future and some of those type folks were doing, Travis Scott and Migos, Future and Travis Scott and Migos, and it was also different from like the sort of stuff that was kind of going on with like drill with like Waka Flocka and Slim Dunk and some of those type folks. It's just interesting because there weren't a ton of folks that were really trying to do this particular kind of more power type trap, I would have to suppose, kind of similar to Meek Mill and maybe like some of his folks that were kind of on like Maybach music and stuff like that. But Meek Mill, it just didn't last that long. I mean, it lasted like in 2013 with like the Self-Made Volume 3 in this particular mixtape. I don't recall this sort of sound being on like Dreams Worth More Than Money from 2015. So I just felt like Meek Mill kind of had like a subgenre kind of going that he was going to do, but he kind of ditched it by the time that 2015 showed up, and he went to prison. So that was kind of the concept in 2014. Was that's this kind of thing. Another song that was like Dope Dealer was Make Me. This is like an early bird kind of 2010s trap rumbler, I'd have to say. This is pretty similar to Travis Scott. This song is pretty similar to Travis Scott, I'd have to say. Definitely like the concept of that particular pitch, and this is just like a basic flex and pull up type cut, I would have to suppose. Pretty good concept to get this one in particular. It's a real nice kind of stunt type song. Once again, Make Me is a real nice stunt type song, I would have to say. Definitely like the concept of this one in particular. Just a real nice highlighted type one to kind of get. Definitely reminds me of like Levels and Dope Dealer, some of those type ones, I would have to suppose. Definitely a good concept to get some of these type ones. It's kind of another basic type trap cut. This has some relatively calm and this has some relatively just kind of brewing type energy. Definitely some vehicle bound type tunes as far as that pitch kind of has with it. Just some good overall type stuff to kind of have. It's a good type one to kind of have. I mean, it's just kind of an advancement of like what Dreamchasers 1 and 2 type was. It's a little bit more of like a heavy stunt type song, I'd have to say. It's a good concept to kind of get some of these type ones. Not necessarily like a nightclub type song full bound. I mean, I suppose it could be, but this kind of also reminds me of something just like some good pull up type music. Just looking flashy, just kind of enjoying some stuff, picking up some supplies, stuff like that, getting some drinks, some stuff like that, and just getting ready to turn up and just kind of have some of those aspects. It's kind of a preparation for getting ready to have a night, something like that. Just kind of works within that aspect, but it's just kind of one that just is kind of a little bit lazy. It just kind of has like that malaise kind of feeling. Just kind of has like a sluggish, just comfortable type feeling about it that just works pretty well. These are just comfortable type tunes that just have a good highlighted sense about it. I definitely would say that like Dope Dealer, Make Me, Level, some of those type pitches just kind of nailed that particular sound pretty well. So it's just a good concept with that, but it's just not quite as high octane as songs like House Party and Burn and some of those type ones, but it's just kind of the concept. So another highlight on here would be Fucking With Me. This is a nice one. This is like a sparkly kind of nightclub gloss of a song, I'd have to say. Definitely appreciate this one, especially like the Tory Lanez hook. Definitely appreciate that quite a bit. I need to know more about Tory Lanez, I'd have to suppose, but it's a good concept about that. So this is like a primped kind of bravado of a song, I'd have to say, and this is just a good, graceful, and kind of step out pizzazz of a song, I'd have to suppose. So I definitely like this one. This is one of those songs that Meek Mill would kind of do something like Amen, just with a little bit more nightclub type pitch in mind, I'd have to suppose. Definitely like the concept of this particular one. This kind of has some good kind of peppy and optimistic bravado about it. Just kind of one that's kind of in a more optimistic type mode and mood, I'd have to say, kind of similar to Ain't Me. Some of those type ones just have a good kind of peppy type sense about them that just have a good affability. So I do like this one in particular. Kind of one where you wouldn't be smoking at the club. Maybe just a little bit of just having a good time, just being a little bit more exuberant about it, something like that. Just an easier kind of time. I mean, I do think it was probably some degree of like a nightclub party type song, but just a little bit more affable, just in a more kind of just a little bit more affable and just kind of a more rosy and optimistic type sense, I'd have to suppose. But I do like the concept of that one. Rich Porter's another highlighted one. I do like this one as well. This has Rick Ross on here, which Rick Ross definitely need to be on this mixtape more. I know that these collaborations I know Meek Mill didn't want to get typecast with these Rick Ross collaborations, it would seem like, but I definitely think some of these need to be on here way more. Rick Ross is only on here like once or twice, I'd have to say. So I do like this one. This is like a grim kind of doomed sounding nightclub bounce of a song, I would feel like. This is just a flex tune, definitely, and it's just a strong composed kind of turn up type song. So this is another power rap type tune, like some of these ones like Make Me and Dope Dealer and Levels, some of those type ones. Definitely like the particular pitch of this particular one. Rick Ross is pretty good on these type songs. He was doing these on like Mastermind and stuff like that. He got some power rap. Rick Ross got some power rap kind of going with albums like God Forgives I Don't and Mastermind and some of those type ones. Just kind of some emphatic type music, I'd have to suppose. It's kind of in a more grim and doom sounding type pitch as far as that kind of aspect kind of goes. I like this particular haunting type one. I definitely feel like Meek Mill could have stood to have had more haunting type beats on here. I like that concept of it. Maybe I Beyond that's a little bit haunting, but for the most part, this is pretty just more like just kind of just elegant, graceful, elegant, kind of just more bravado type trap album. I'd have to suppose just really has some power rap about it, I'd have to say, for the most part. But there are just some ones on here that do have a little bit of haunting relative just kind of ambience about it, I'd have to say, but just not many. There's also some wintry type songs on here, like Ain't Me is pretty highlighted one. I like that Yo Gotti was on this particular song. There's another cat on here. O'Malley was on here. So this is a nice one. This is definitely like a wintry kind of early bird, Lil Durk and Future type cut, I would have to suppose. Definitely appreciate the particular concept about this one. This is like a glossy kind of energized bravado type tune, I would definitely feel like, and it just reminds me of something that was in trap music like in 2016, 2017, and some of those type sing-songy type hooks kind of popped up. This is more of like a sing-songy type tune. Definitely something that like in a trap variation of what like just kind of like a trap music type variation is something that Flo Rida and Nelly would do some of those type pitch where it's kind of sing-songy, but just has the concept of being more trap type, similar to like Lil Durk, Future, some of those type folks as far as that pitch kind of happens. But it's just a wintry type one. Definitely appreciate the pitch of this particular one. Kind of, I would say that Fucking With Me and Ain't Me are definitely some wintry type ones, just kind of having like the more colder seasons as far as that pitch kind of goes. These are just some good turn up type songs to kind of have just for like the colder weather. So I'm glad that some of these kind of happen. I like that 2 Chainz did that with his 2013 album also, so it's a good pitch to kind of get that. Right Now is a good highlighted one. Definitely appreciated this one. This is like a revved up kind of turn up boiler, I would have to say. Definitely appreciate this one quite a bit. This is like an exhilarating kind of nightclub shine of a song, I'd have to say. And this song has an emphatic hook. This song has an emphatic hook, and it's a pretty good bop. So Right Now has the right amount of turn up on this particular song. Definitely like the energy of this one quite a bit. This is definitely like a Make It Rain type tune, definitely a good dance type cut to kind of get in particular. This has a high octane type catchiness and overall infectiousness about it. This one's just a very affable type one, and definitely one of the best songs on the mixtape, I'd have to suppose. Definitely appreciate this one quite a bit. Meek Mill could have definitely used another song like this one. This is just a good kind of brewing in a nightclub type fare as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just throwing money around, seeing women dance and stuff like that. Just kind of the pitch of just going along with it. Just kind of the pitch of going along with it and having a good weekend type time just within that relative pitch. This is definitely one I think you could hear on a night out, something like that. I mean, obviously 10 years, 11 years later, just the pitch behind it's not quite as heavily as it was like 10 years ago, but I would still have to say this would be a good highlight for like a nightclub as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. Definitely needed way more songs like this, I'd have to say. I mean, Dope Dealer, Make Me, I Beyond That, some of those particular type ones, Rich Porter, Ain't Me. There's a good amount of nightclub songs on here. Definitely I would have to suppose. Even I'm Leaning in Heaven or Hell work for that sort of pitch. Basically all the songs I recommend are some great kind of turn up type style. Basically all 9 of the songs I recommend on here are some pretty excellent turn up type songs I would recommend highly for like nightclubs and stuff like that. Just some venues, places like that, just some good pitches, restaurants, even just some places where there'd be wings and music and stuff like that. Some good drinks and bottles popping, or some good drinks and bottles popping as far as that particular pitch kind of happens. Despite the fact that this mixtape is a decade old, I still highly recommend these songs having some turn up and just overall affability. Now there may not be as many house party type songs on here compared to some of the earlier ones, but I still would have to say this is some great turn up for the most part. I mean, it has some basic kind of energy, and a lot of these are kind of vanilla just within the aspect behind them. They just work and they do their service, but it's just not quite as turned up in terms of like sheer kind of craziness that Meek Mill can get on some of his more energetic type songs, like Black Magic and Believe It and some of those type ones, and Tupac Back and some of those type pitches that he has, and I'm a Boss and some of those. But I would definitely have to say it's some good turn up here. Just the concept of it is just kind of, I feel like this mixtape is still underhanded though. To talk about the 7 songs I didn't recommend on here, basically some of these just had some kind of poor productions. I kind of felt like Hip Hop was kind of a waste of a song on here. That one just, I feel like the song Hip Hop just had an uninteresting topic on there. It was just an overall bland type one that just didn't really have much spark of interest. I'd have to suppose pretty much a dull one, I'd have to suppose. And I'd have to say some other ones like the Lil Snoop and Lil Snoop freestyle were just some poor ones that just didn't really have a lot of affability about those. Lil Snoop was basically a buddy of Meek Mill's that was signed to Maybach Music and stuff like that. He was going to be like one of the next ones to blow up in 2013, but he passed on in 2013, which was pretty unfortunate, I'd have to suppose. But still, these songs didn't particularly fare that well, I'd have to say. Then like Money Ain't No Issue. I kind of like the composition of Money Ain't No Issue. I like some of the beat arrangements of that particular one, but just the execution of how that one was handled was just not that good at all. It just really had a poor execution of how it was supposed to be and that sort of stuff. We Ain't the Same as just a poor one just because it didn't have Meek Mill on there, and it probably should have. I would have thought that that one could have turned out better, but that one was just kind of a sloppy type one that just didn't work that well. And some ones like My Life was just kind of one that just didn't have a good assortment of how My Life was just not one that I vibed with that well. I would have to suppose just didn't really have a good connection as far as that pitch kind of went. And I would say the end, the outro type song was just a poor one that just didn't really have much to it. Just was kind of a poor outro as far as that pitch kind of happened with this. So it's just kind of concept about some of those. So basically, I'm going to score this mixtape, me basically recommending 9 songs out of 16 on this particular mixtape. I'm going to go ahead and give this mixtape like a 6.5 out of 10. I'm going to raise the score a bit just because it is a free project and there are a good almost 10 songs that you can get that are pretty badass as far as that particular pitch kind of has with it. Definitely some awesome concepts about it. It does have some rumblers on here. Definitely some decent kind of nightlife. This one's just a little bit more lively. This mixtape is actually a little bit more social compared to earlier Dreamchasers, where I feel like Dreamchasers 1 at least had the high octane energy of House Party, but minus that one, it didn't have a ton of kind of House Party type cuts and stuff like that and nightclub type joints. And Dreamchasers 2 was too busy trying to be like an album quality type project just with projects like just with songs like Burn and Amen and some of those type ones as Meek Mill is preparing to put out his album. But this one's definitely social. I think there's some social aspects about this, just some powerful kind of trap type music and stuff like that, some wintry type tunes on here, just some overall power trap and things of that particular magnitude and pitch. Just some good elegant kind of stepping out gracefulness just within that pitch of just having some good times just within a nightclub and outing fair as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. Definitely some music that I would want to say that you could hear at a night venue just with mixtape fair, despite the fact that this project is free. So I definitely appreciate that concept. A 6.5 out of 10. The social score I'm going to go ahead and give an 8.25 out of 10 because I feel like it's just that damn good as far as that pitch kind of happens. Over half the project has these quality type tunes as far as that kind of goes. There's just not enough of them. I would have felt like Meek Mill is definitely on a roll for a good assortment of these songs on here, but he definitely should have backed them up with like 3 or 4 or 5 more songs, just like some of these ones that are most powerful on here. Songs like Heaven or Hell, songs like Dope Dealer, songs like I Beyond That, some of those type ones. I would definitely say another sing-songy song like Ain't Me, and then another song like I'm Leaning, that's just another car type tune just for stepping out and having some flex. Another quality song like I'm Leaning, having some stunt and flex type vibes as far as that pitch kind of has with it. Definitely needed more of those moments, but for the most part, this is a good helping of some stuff. Meek Mill was on the right track on here, just didn't quite deliver as wholesomely as it needed to. Like I said, it's just kind of an underhanded kind of mixtape, I'd have to say, but it does have the quality. It's the weakest of the 3, but it does have, it's the most social of the 3 also, I'd have to suppose. So it's an interesting concept for that as far as that pitch kind of goes. But in terms of the future, like Meek Mill has dropped a collaboration album with Rick Ross, which came out in late 2023. So it's a dope concept to get that one in particular. But I'm definitely going to review some more Meek Mill's mixtapes and stuff like that. There's a few more albums like Championships and some of those type pitches. So there is some more Meek Mill I'm going to have to get to. But this is definitely a decently quality project here. Definitely some social affability that it has and some high grade nightclub pizzazz. It's somewhat underhanded, but still good enough to recommend. It's a little bit underhanded, but it's still good enough to recommend for the most part, I'd have to suppose. So definitely download this.